Welcome to CivilNet. Our guest today is Arzu Geybullayeva. She is a blogger and a freelance journalist originally from Azerbaijan, currently living in Istanbul. Arzu, welcome to CivilNet. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You took part in the presidential elections that took place in Azerbaijan on October 9. You went there as an independent observer. And in your blog, Flying Carpets and Broken Pipelines, you spoke about your experiences as an observer. You spoke about the election violations that took place, among them ballot stuffing, the carousel system that's in place. Tell us about your impressions of Election Day in your electoral district.
Well, it was a very interesting day to me personally. I was at the precinct where I was actually voting myself. And the precinct was not far from where I live. And there were two polling stations inside the precinct. It was a gymnasium. And both of the polling stations, they had local observers. But the local observers are not really into observing much, unfortunately. And that was one of my initial observations as soon as I entered the precinct. On both sides, they set up two polling stations. So number 9 and number 10, I was supposed to vote in number 9, and we had a long table of local observers, and most of them were either party members of the ruling party or teachers from the school. And really, all they did all day was to sit and basically meddle in the business of the 4 independent observers who were there, including me. And they weren't very happy with what we were doing. As an observer, you're supposed to walk around, talk to the people who are representing there, the election commission, and ask them questions where you see when there's a violation. And these people were not doing anything. And every time we were standing up and walking around, they were saying, "Oh, you should come and sit down. You don't really have to, walk around." But what was really interesting was that I was the only one with a camera and also press credentials, in addition to as an independent observer. And so the moment when I took my camera out and I started filming, the whole kind of connection between me and the observers who were there and the representatives of the election commission changed immediately.
Right.
They kind of, I wouldn't say they got scared, but they were definitely concerned that I was there with a camera and that I could shoot anytime and anything that I wanted. And they actually tried to prevent me initially, because when I took my camera, I was filming the ombudsman who was at the polling station, at our polling station, talking to one of the independent observers and urging her not to meddle in the business of the representative of the Central Election Commission, which was very strange because she wasn't. She was just trying to understand why they were doing the ballots differently, or why they were telling some of the people who were coming to vote who to vote for. And when she saw my camera, when Ombudsman saw my camera that I was filming her, she immediately changed her tone. She started talking about understanding and cooperation. And she started urging people who were sitting there as independent observers, or the so-called independent observers, to understand each other and not to get angry. And there was a moment, just like an incident that I would like to share with you. One of the independent observers from the polling station number 10, he was representing a different political party, as far as I remember. And the representatives of the Central Election Commission were not very happy with him filming them. He had a small camera. I think it was like a mobile phone camera. And eventually they kicked him out. And according to the law, you can only kick out an observer, whether it's an independent or a state observer, if you have a paper from the court. But they didn't have a paper from the court. And so eventually the guy was kicked out. 3 policemen came after him. And I was filming all of this. When he asked me if he could make a statement, I filmed his statement. And when he was being taken out from the polling station, I was filming that as well. And it was very interesting because everybody was so concerned about me filming this. The so-called observers were constantly asking the same question over and over again. Why is she with the camera? Who does she represent? Who does she represent was just the general theme of the question. Are you an independent, or are you a pro,
Who are you? Whose interests are you protecting?
Exactly.
Observing the elections.
Yes.
Arzu, I just want to say that, for those who follow what takes place in the region. Following the elections, the sitting president, Ilham Aliyev, who is now the new president, sitting for his third term, received just about 85% of the vote. And his main opponent, Jamil Hasanli, which was a united candidate for a number of opposition political parties, didn't even reach the 6% mark. Now, the OSCE has criticized the process. The U.S. State Department, in a statement, said that the elections fell short of international standards. There has been condemnation within Azerbaijan by opposition forces about the election results. Right. You know, in most post-Soviet countries, we see the same scenario being played over and over again. In your opinion, as a young journalist engaged with events taking place in your country and in the region, how important is the establishment of democracy, of democratic institutions in the region for the prospects of peace?
I mean, it's very basic. It's like in any other human right. You know, these people are entitled to to live in a democratic country with rights that democracy allows for. I'm sure if Azerbaijan was a democratic country, we would have had democratic elections, and the results would have been different. I cannot see the future, and I cannot say that Jamil Hasanli would have 100% won, because there is still a popular support for Aliyev, because people just don't see any other person or individual apart from him. But at least there would have been a lot more room to talk about whether Azerbaijan is a democracy, and instead we're now talking about pretentious democracy that Azerbaijan is putting on. It's like an act. It's very important. I think if things were different, if those same observers, when I was arguing with them at the vote count, because I was there again at 7 o'clock when they closed the doors, you know, when I was telling them that you just added a fresh stack of papers, a fresh stack of ballots with signs that were crossing Aliyev's name, you know, they were just telling me that those papers were there, and they weren't, because they were not even folded.
Right.
And, you know, if this was a democratic country, this would not happen. And obviously, you would not see all those videos and footage of election commission people and observers stuffing the ballot boxes just like that. I think it's very important. We would have probably had different results. Also, because of all those 10 candidates, there was only one true candidate that was running against Aliyev, and that was Jamil Hasanli. All the other 8 were made up people. They were not
placed there to show that there's a plurality and that
exactly, because all throughout the election time, like in the run-up to the election time, all they did was to protect or to argue for the president rather than otherwise, and they would constantly have issues with Jamil Hasanli during the public television debates, during any other time, even during the rallies that they were organizing in support of the elections.
Right. We read that Aliyev was so sure of his victory that he really didn't even run a campaign. And
no, he didn't.
There were obstacles to the other candidates to, you know, put forth their own campaign policies. There have been protests following the elections in Baku. The problem from what we see here is that the opposition is weak and fragmented and cannot consolidate, even though they attempted that with Hasanli. Do you see the protests continuing, or will they fade out or die down? Do you see that there's a strong reaction in Azerbaijani public opinion to demand a recount, to demand a new election, to say that these elections were flawed?
I'll start from the last question, whether there's a strong public opinion and whether there's a chance of calling off the election results. Unfortunately, from what I saw that day during the elections, was that you have a very big chunk of people who don't see an alternative. Because according to them, you know, this person has been in power all this time. He has taken enough, as they say, and they don't trust the new person who it will replace Aliyev eventually. And that's why to expect a popular opinion and hope that there's going to be a countrywide call for recount, I'm slightly skeptical about that. Whether there's going to be more protests, I'm guessing there will be. Unfortunately, the biggest problem with the protests and the rallies is the way police treats the people who come to these protests. And a lot of anger is actually taken from the youth who come there. Especially from what we saw in these last protests, the way police treated the young people. And just like it's been treating the young people in the past couple years, whenever there is a rally, and this is their constitutional right, and yet it's not done. Their constitutional right is not respected. And so I think the protests might continue, but the results and how effective they're going to be is kind of unknown. And the vote recount, I'm very skeptical about the vote recount. Cemil Hasanli, right after the elections, made a statement that he, of course, didn't agree with the results and that he's going to go to the Constitutional Court with, the demand. But the Constitutional Court turned his demand down. And this is unfortunately the reality. No matter how hard you push us, there's going to always be a kind of like a preventive method to stop him.
Right. Well, Arzu, just as a final question, you are a young representative of the new generation, the new Azerbaijani generation. You are now living in Istanbul, working and living in Istanbul. I assume that you go back regularly because you were just there on October 9 for the presidential elections. Do you place faith or hope in the youth of Azerbaijan to ensure that democracy eventually will be established in your country?
Definitely. I think our youth has become a lot more active in the past few years than it has been in the past, which is a very good sign. And I'm very hopeful. I think that's the only reason why I keep on going back and I keep on doing this work that I do, because I hope that me, and including every other young Azerbaijani, is willing and interested and motivated and determined enough to finally, at some point, sooner, and I hope it's sooner than it is later, to see our country democratic and live in a country and be proud of the country where we're from, rather than face all these criticisms and argue with people about all the human rights situations and issues and freedom of expression problems in the country.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Our guest was Arzu Geybullayeva. She is an Azerbaijani freelance journalist and blogger currently living in Istanbul. She spoke to us today about the recent presidential elections in Azerbaijan. Thank you for watching CivilNet.